This is the 20th season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, AFTCO, Pro Guide Batteries, Spro, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing. Final show of the 2024 season. It is December 23rd, and we're going to dive into the nitty gritty today. A little over a week ago, Bass announced the new Elite Angler Board of Professionals, made up of 6 Elite Series anglers of varying degrees of experience. And one of those is a guy who fished his first tournament with bass in like 1991 in Illinois. And then he's been on BTL a bunch, and that's none other than Mark Menendez. So I said, heck, let's just bring Mark Menendez on and get the lowdown on this after. Is it hard to believe that you've been around as long as you have, Mark? Because I do the same thing with BTL. I'm like, oh my gosh, 15 years.
You know, Matt, I have to pinch myself. Thanks for having me, by the way. But I have to pinch myself. This will be the 34th year that I've been on tour. I've been so fortunate to be at the elite level since that first year. Once I got out of those invitationals, I made it to the top 100s, and doggone, it's been like a flash. I can remember the first bass I caught. I can remember my first draw of my career, which was Shaw Grigsby. You know, it's been a whirlwind, and now you look and doggone, everything's gray. It used to not be gray. I look like Santa Claus here this
It wouldn't
season.
be if it wasn't for the fishing. You'd still be.
You're probably right, because you know how you become a millionaire fishing?
You start out as a multimillionaire.
That's exactly right. And so I didn't do it for the money. I did it because I love it, and I still love it. So that's why we're here today.
What year would you say, or was there a tournament where you like realized like, oh my gosh, like this is my full-time job. I am 100% a professional bass angler who gets paid to fish tournaments and represent companies, like where it was like a done deal. Like that's what you did.
You know, Matt, I started this in the invitationals in 91, 92.
Yeah.
And I was a kid out of college. I just got my degree in biology, and I didn't have a big sponsorship base, and I certainly didn't have someone that was going to pay for the thing. So I had to do it myself. So I got into real estate. I was a real estate agent.
Oh, I didn't know
I had
that.
a janitorial service that I cleaned commercial buildings. I had a vending machine business, and I was a guide on Kentucky Lake. So as my fishing ability grew and started getting some relationships and partnerships in the business, I started reducing things. The first thing I quit doing was the buildings, then the vending machines, and then the guiding. That all went away. And then all of a sudden I found out that I was in the fishing business. And that was probably in 95, fall of 95. I had a good tournament at the James River. I made an All-American. I made about $40,000 in the month of October that year. And I was like, this could be viable. So that 40,000 went away real quick, Matt, as you expect, on some bad tournaments after that. So it's been an up and down yo-yo career after that.
All right, let's dive right into it. So before to start diving into it, I would like to get your take on 2019 to 2024 Bassmaster Elite Series, immediate post split with the BPT going into the entirely revamped new Elite Series, and then just your opinion on what those last 6 years have been like as far as a transition with the anglers, with bass, the whole 9 yards. Just kind of paint the picture from the inside as a veteran angler of what the last 6 years have been like on the Elite Series.
Well, in 18, when we had the split and some anglers chose to go a different direction, there was a lot of unsettling times there. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know. I never felt as if bass was going to go away. It was never going to go away. It is a very strong built company. It has a great media machine, and the product has been superior for 50 years. So that was never an issue. It was never going to go away. But the honest thing, Matt, is, and it's funny that you started the show asking me about the first year I fished. 2019 was the funnest year, with the exception of the first year that I fished, of my entire career. It was so fun. It was so light. You didn't have the worry. And I'm not talking about performance. I'm just talking about how the events were run, the camaraderie of the new young guys that came in that filled those spots on the Elite Series. It was gentlemanly. It was almost like Wimbledon. It was almost like the tennis court kind of deal. It was, I had anglers that would come by me and kind of be in a neck down there and say, Mark, can I get past you to go to the back of the creek? I won't start my outboard for 100 yards if you'll let me get by that. I'm like, absolutely, thank you. Or Mark, can I fish this left-hand side of the bay? Is that okay? Sure. It was great. And I think that year was quite the honeymoon period for the anglers and for bass. Bass had a lot of anxiety as to, are we going to have new superstars? And I told them at that point, I said, look, Drew Cook, Patrick Walters, all of these young guys that came in that year, give them 4 tournaments and watch and see. You'll have your new crop of superstars, phenomenal anglers coming straight out of college. So that foundation in 19 was great. 2020, I only got to participate in 2 tournaments because I hurt my back and had to withdraw with a medical. And when I came back in 21, it kind of was reminiscent a little bit of prior to 18. A little friction here, a little friction there, a guy cutting you off, up the bank from you, a little short. I'm kind of like, I've been there before. And then it has developed a little further. The one thing that's important in everything, and my wife beats me over the head of this because I'm terrible, Matt. I'm terrible at this, and that's communication. And I think we had a little communication breakdown. Bass may have gotten a little bit comfortable because they knew they were going to survive after the 19 and the 20 seasons. And that communication back and forth slowed down some. That's just a natural thing when you get comfortable. So I'm so proud to say that we started the Angler Board. I'm really pleased to be a big part of it. I'm the token old guy. We have various representatives at various parts of their career. So it's completely a cross section of viewpoints and thoughts where you are in your career. And I think that's one of the smartest things that we've done as a group of anglers is get this thing going. I am pleased to report, Matt, that it is going really, really well. The communication with bass is great. It's open. It's closed communication, fortunately. So some of the things that we have talked about and some of the things that we have worked on have not come out until the proper time. So that's very important too, to earn the trust of both sides of the table. And we're there to help bass make better decisions, AKA the no information rule. Well, they jumped the gun a little bit on that. And we said, no, hold on. This is why. And then that's what we're there for as a backstop, to give them the advice, the vision, and the protection of not making decisions too quick before it's been discussed and well thought out, and make sure it's good for everybody.
This board, the Elite Angler Board, not a part of BASS or Bassmaster. It is an independent, separate entity that Bassmaster has chosen to recognize and work with independently, is the way I understand it.
Yes.
And that's important too.
Oh, it's very important. It's very important to have a standalone group of anglers that participate with bass, and have our own interests at heart. We're not trying to be another tournament organization, Matt, like we've done in the past. Anglers have done in the past. We're there as a sounding board to get the whole voice of the Elite Series. Because look at it, Matt. I mean, there's 105 guys in the Elite Series.
Mm-hmm.
That's 105 different businesses. And we don't all do business the same way. So the best thing to do is to kind of cost average everything so that the majority all can run their businesses in a very smooth and profitable way, and include Bass to make the translation between, hey, I got a real question about a rule. And we clear that rule. We make that clear, make that rule much easier to understand. We remove the gray to where it's more of a yes or no answer. Like a no wake zone. You got to idle through a no wake zone. You can't run through one. That's a yes or a no answer. So those are some of the things that we're working on, and so far it has been great.
I do want to get into some of the nitty gritty on like what type of input you'll have as or what type of things you'll be looking at. But I want to go back and just kind of finish the story. First of all, what was the catalyst to where you think this got done now in 2024 and Bass was open to it? I do 200 BTL shows a year, and I talk with a lot of people, and I never seen the last 12 to 16 months so much internal turmoil across the board, from rookies to veterans. Just walk through why you think now and not when the split happened, or not 2021 when the friction kind of started. Why November, December of 2024?
Well, I go back to what Melissa always says. It's about communication.
Mm-hmm.
We were not communicating on the left side and the right side whatsoever. And I don't want to make that sound political at all. That's not what I mean. Just the left hand and the right hand. And I think the lack of communication to the angler saying, hey, no entry fees. We weren't prepared for that. That doesn't match up with some of our business as well. It matches up with some others very well. So I think that was the big ambiguity that really sparked the conversations. And then us going to Bass and saying, hey, let's form a group so that we can have a sounding board. Negative publicity is not always good, but publicity is publicity. We don't want all of that. We want this to be a smooth transition. We want this to what the business partners of Bass, we're all business partners with Bass. We wanted it what was best for all of us. And that has come to fruition quickly. We formed, we voted, we got our representatives out there. And our representatives, doggone, it's a wide base. It's from guys that have only been in the elites for a couple of years to me being here forever and ever and ever. Wow, some of these young guys have some great business minds, Matt. And have gotten to know them better and see that they are really smart individuals. So I'm really proud of our group. I'm really proud of how our group communicates. And I'm really proud of our anglers that are starting to reach out to each representative instead of it being just this mass of complaining and all these ambiguous thoughts. And it all just took mushrooms into a big thundercloud like little Abner would have. This morning I got a message from Ike. Ike's coming to me. He's a part of my group, and he's coming to me with a suggestion. We're moving on that suggestion, talking about that this morning. So it's a cleaner, more concise way to get an issue or a point or a rule across that we've not had. So now we're gaining traction where we were in a muddy bog. Now we're gaining traction on every idea. Do we have it all fixed? No, sir, we don't. But are we moving one step at a time? I'm proud to say we are.
Those anglers consist of John Cruz, yourself, Lee Livesey, Drew Benton, Alex Weatherall, which that's on my bad. I don't know Alex very well at all. I've heard a lot of people. That's why I said I've heard a lot of other Elite Series anglers speak very highly of him. I need to get him on the show and get to know that guy.
You do. He is very bright, very bright.
Yep. And then at this point, you could call him infamous, the infamous Ben Milliken. is also
Well,
on that.
well,
But I mean, it's when you get to know Ben, there's a lot more than meets the surface with Ben.
absolutely. And that was a great present to get to sit down with Ben and talk to Ben and realize that when his brain is moving, it's very deep and concise thought. The persona, that's a total different deal with his YouTube and as an angler. But doggone it, Ben's sharp, and I really appreciate his viewpoints on a lot of the things that we've talked about.
Chase Anderson was put he was put in a difficult position when Anderson Media Group took over Bass. I think that's an acceptable fact at this point.
Absolutely.
From the previous owners to what he came into, to dealing with the split, to dealing with coming back, to getting his feet wet and understanding this whole industry. You've been in it for 31 years. It's not something that you just walk in and understand the nuances of. There's a lot of unwritten rules and assumed things and ways that things are done that aren't on paper. It's intimidating if you're walking in and you don't know. And I'm sure it's like that in any other sport, individual sport, profession. I'm sure you don't just walk on a job site in construction and know what to do and how to handle it. The one thing, having talked to a number of anglers that are on this panel, and having talked to Chase himself at both the Bassmaster Classic last year and at the Hall of Fame banquet, is it seems like he genuinely wants to make this work for what is both best for the business model that makes it financially suitable and stable for Bass, its employees, and Anderson, and the anglers as well. Is that a correct kind of assumption?
I think
correct vibe?
I think that is a very fair statement, Matt. Yes, Chase Anderson is a good man. He's a good fella. He was thrust into a new business, a different kind of business that has so many facets to it than what he may have been in before. And then he got blindsided by the split. I mean, he thought it was just going to step right in and the business keep rolling, and they hit this hurdle. So that's fine, but there's a learning curve there as well, and getting anglers. Look at that young man, that's scary.
That was when you were going through the pipe at Dardanelle in the aluminum boat, right?
Exactly. In fact, the aluminum boat is on the water today. I've repurposed that to my son, and he uses it to get back and forth to his duck blind on Lake Barkley, and they're having a big day up there today.
I didn't mean to interrupt you there. We're showing a picture of the 2009 Diamond Drive Menendez's champion Elite Series Blue Trophy there.
And but Chase is doing a good job getting people around him that understand facets of the business. And yes, he understands that this communication is so important, so that there are no hiccups, so that it can be a group idea. It can make things better. I have a lot of confidence in Chase. He does things. I think he tries to do what is right, or what he feels is right. And I can deal with that, because if I feel it's wrong, I have the ability to pick up the phone and talk to him. Now, one of the things we do as anglers, and I include me in this whole statement, Matt, is we care so much. We're so passionate, and I don't like to use that word a lot, but we just care so darn much about what we're doing. We can get off on the rails.
Mm-hmm.
I get off on the rails a lot of time, Matt. I'm an only child, and I only see it one way.
So
my way, so
so am I.
Well, see there, we're perfect. And sometimes anglers think they know more about things, and they don't come with a suggestion or be diplomatic. And I feel for Chase, because Chase's been beat up by several of us, just because we really care about our industry and our group. So I hate that that's happened. And now that we have a board and a method and a way, we can come together as two different entities with an agenda and say, this, and this, these are problems, and these are why. And we don't have that escalation of anger or frustration or whatever. We can get through that and get to the root of the problem. And I think this is going to be good for both sides, especially Bass, where now we have an avenue.
Chase, who is the CEO of Bass, his quote was, "We're excited to be working with the ABP to ensure consistent and clear." I forgot. This is going to be a very CEO like statement. So hopefully I can get through it. "We're excited to be working with the ABP to ensure consistent and clear communication between Bass and the elite anglers. There have been challenges trying to communicate with the 103 anglers who understandably have 103 different priorities when running their individual businesses. We consider the formation of the ABP an opportunity to build a more constructive relationship with anglers as we work together to advance and grow the sport of bass fishing. We remain committed to being the leader in the sport of bass fishing and believe that working with the ABP will strengthen our leadership position and better prepare us for the future." So that's what Chase had to say. Dude, you've been around a long time. Has this ever happened before? Has there ever been inklings of this? I mean, I did the media stuff for the PAA back in the day. They ran their own tournament trail, but it also was like a representation for the anglers on both the FLW and the bass side, and then the PAA side, which culminated in the TTBC. That water got muddy. I know there's a number of anglers who are, or a couple anglers on this that are familiar with that. I know there's like the NPAA that's going on right now. There's some other like did this happen before? Is this unique? What's different about this than any of the other acronyms?
Well, I think what's different about this is we're not a tournament group. The ABP is not going to be hosting events. So therefore we're not competition, so to speak.
Yep.
I didn't think the PAA was ever really competition with Bass because we did everything between Bass events. We never scheduled on top of. There was never a competition there.
Yep.
And then the TTBC that came from the PAA, the big tournament, we rolled that into Bass with all the Texas events. So some of that still lives. Were we a little early with the other organizations and trying to conquer too much, aka health insurance and retirement plans and things like that? I think we were very, very hopeful that we could get some of that done, but that was a monumental task, and we got bogged down with that. So here we're an advisory group that is working on one set of guidelines, and that is bass. We're working on angler relations. We're working on rules. We're a sounding board for ideas. Now, we don't have anything to do with Bass's business. Bass has never been a nonprofit, and that needs to be said. So it has to be a business that is.
And you want them to make money, because the more money they make, the more stable they are. And you make your living based on the platform of Bass, which your sponsors need to have belief in that they're stable and they're going to be along for years to come, is the definition of a symbiotic relationship.
That's exactly the word.
I didn't mean to cut you off there,
Matt. That was exactly the word I was going to use. I was going to get to use something for my education, my biology degree, but that's exactly right. The more that Bass is stable, the more that they build in their media group, they build on that media machine. That means the people that I work for are going to get more exposure. That's what I'm hired to do, is get exposure. I do that through fishing. I do that through multiple different ways, through my television show, through YouTube's, all the socials, all of that stuff. So it all comes to this big pyramid. And when that foundation gets out there very wide and very strong, Bass is a very strong organization, and it carries a lot of families' incomes during the year. So I want the business to do well. I want the business to succeed. It gives me a platform. It gives an angler a format to do multiple different things. So they're so important in my life as an angler. And then I go back because I was close with Ray Scott. I'm one of my favorite people in the whole world, and the history that's gone on. When I'm most professional fishermen, Matt, are 1/10 of 1%. 1/10 of 1%. We are 1/10 of 1% of the people that want to do what they do for a living. And we're fortunate enough to do it. And I've done it for a very long time. And I'm grateful for that 1/10 of 1%. Without Bass, I would have never done it.
You mentioned Ray, and I wrote down, I have one note on this page. I said, what do you think Ray would think of this?
Ray, I think he would like it.
It's a complex question, Mark.
It is a complex question. When Ray was the owner, he made most of the decisions. He had important people around him, and Helen Sevier and Bob Cobb, and they formulated lots of good decisions. They tried different things. That's what's made Bass so successful. It's not been static. They've tried different things, megabucks, the Federation, bringing anglers to the Classic, changing the formats of the Classic.
E50s, the majors.
The E50s, the majors, all of those things have helped make the sport climb in its own way. But I think Ray would be proud of us, knowing that Bass does have the final say on making whatever decision it is. But if Ray would have had Larry Nixon or Denny Brower or Guido Hibden in those formative years, there where he could give them a topic and hear all of their opinions on it, he would have been twice as successful, not to mention the great success that he had. He may have been twice as successful just to see it from the other side.
Mm-hmm. And this is just for the Elite Series and representing however many anglers are on the Elite Series, typically between 100 and 105 based on medical exemptions and injuries and legend stuff. Doesn't trickle down to the Opens, doesn't affect the Bass Nation. This is strictly a line of communication for those 100 anglers to have an open line of communication with Bass just for the Elite Series.
Well, as it stands now, I would have to say yes on that in those terms. Will we be asked to mitigate problems in the Opens or questions about rules or something that we may at some point in time? But right now we're focused on the Elite Series.
The catalyst, you mentioned the payouts, they restructured the payouts. Are you at liberty to talk at all about how you guys ended up with the new numbers for the payouts? Because a drastic change from the no entry fee payouts to the $10,000 contribution by each Elite Series angler payouts. That happened while I was in Mexico, and I looked at them and went, "Oh wow! Like this is a change. Like it's not just a compromise. It seems very. It seems like they listened, and that this is a healthy way where you can kind of make a living at this."
Well, you agree. It's an absolute change to what was put in print first. And we, the board and our group, we came up with this, and we did this in a very democratic way. It was confusing on how we did it, I admit, because there was so much data we put together. We put together a bunch of different plans, a bunch of different payouts, and it took us time to get the entire group to vote through and pick one that satisfied the most of our anglers. You get 100 guys in a room, you're not going to make everybody happy. But if we can make the consensus happy, that's what we were really trying to do. And John Cruz, our president, set these different plans and payouts together, Matt, pretty much like the NCAA basketball bracket. This plan versus this plan, we vote on it. That plan moved over. This plan versus this plan, this one moved over till we got down to the two that were the most popular. Then that one was voted for. And that way the group, the anglers, know which one had the higher percentage. I think that was some of the ambiguity from the lack of communication that was frustrating to the anglers, because we didn't actually know what the percentages were on any surveys we may have taken. So once it got through that, and it was a painstaking process, and I'm so grateful that our group stuck with it and got down to this, this is a much better plan than what we were offered going forward. And I think Bass is happy with that. I think the majority of our anglers are happy with this. Will we be able to develop new partnerships and chase down more financial solvency as far as sponsorships and things like that. We're hoping that that happens and our payout goes up. In my opinion, there's nothing wrong with an angler having a little bit of a stake in this, have a little skin in the game, so to speak. This keeps things above board. It keeps us working harder. It makes us less complacent, because if it's just laid out there and there's, I would love the no entry fee things, but there's some things there to be thought about, Matt. I mean, that $45,000 was a good tax leverage if an angler had a great season, win a couple of $100,000. That's an expense in your business. So you're not paying taxes on that $45,000 that you earned that way. So that was kind of a concession we had to give up, but I think the payout is good. And I think we'll be okay this first year. Do I foresee changes coming down the pike? You never know after the end of the first year. We might see some different changes.
For those listening on iTunes, first place stays the same, $100,000. The top five are 100,000, 20, 15, 12, 5, 11,750. For fifth, 10th place is now $10,000. 25th place is $6,000, and then 26th through 50th place is $5,550. Something that I think is interesting is a lot more money going into the big bass pot. That was one of the things that was crazy to me in the original one with the no entry fees, was how much emphasis. I kind of understand it. I could see him in a room going, hey, big bass, big stage, big dreams. Let's make the big bass actually mean something, especially if it's going to be in what was kind of our catch slogan. So daily big bass is $1,000 a day, and that goes for all 4 days, which I thought was interesting, because usually on the final day, if you caught a giant one, it didn't count because they only did big bass for the full field or for the first 3 days. So I like that. Overall big bag, the big bag is 2,000, overall big bass 2,000, and then closest is bass track. So hypothetically, if you catch the biggest bass of the tournament, you would win $3,000, one for the daily big bass and then 2,000 for the overall big bass. And then AOY payouts, 100,000 for first, 50, 25, 12.5, and 6,250. I love that top three, a top three in the Angler of the Year. Mark, you know how hard it is to do that. You've been hunting around that in the past before, but 25,000 is enough to make that to make that worth its while, even if you're not first or second. I think that's an incredibly good payout. So
I really do. And man, I want to go back. Bass has X amount of dollars that they put towards this, and they put $200,000 more dollars into the kitty this year for us. So what we fished for last year, when you take 45,000 and multiply that by 105, you've got another $4.5 million there. So that's an awful lot of money that we were spending of our own money to get that payout up. Mm-hmm. I'm spending less than 20% of that amount of money, and I still have the opportunity to win enough money to keep my business viable, keep some cash flow coming. So I think this is a great step in the right.
You're in 10,000, right? So roughly $1,000 a tournament, roughly. Yeah, especially roughly, if you fish the classic. So you're paying $1,000 a tournament at this.
Right.
Here's the thing that I am keenly aware of in the opens, and I'm wondering, and I know it translates to the Elite Series. You have perennial top 10 anglers who may tank a couple tournaments, but they're going to finish 4 or 5 times a year in the top 10. That whole group of anglers, once this that I'm highlighting here, the first through the 10th, they don't care about the 40th place because they're the 30th place or the 20th. They want it weighted in the top 10 because they know that historically they're going to have 2 or 3 top 10 finishes, and that's going to equate to $150,000, $200,000 over the course of the year.
Correct.
So you've got them that are pushing for, I don't care if we don't pay out below 20th. That's fine with me. Pay the guys who perform. Pay for performance. It's a pay to perform, not. Then you've got a lot of guys who are going, okay, well, listen, I make my living doing this. I make the classic every single year, and I might have a top 10 or win one, but I live in that 12th to 30th or 40th range. And they're going, why are we rewarding these guys who are finishing in the top 5 or 10 when I'm consistently finishing in the top 20 to 30% of the field? And I'm not able to make a living if all the money's at the top. So they want that money taken from the top and distributed into that top half.
Right.
Then you've got the anglers, quite frankly, who are trying to survive out there. They're hoping they can get their next deposit in. And by God, there's some that if they make a check, boy, it's amazing. But if they don't make a check and don't have to pay anything, boy, that's fantastic. So the lower the entry fees, the lower the payout, the more chances, the more pulls it gives them at that slot machine to win the $100,000 and somehow get ahead of the curve. So you've got a bunch of different anglers, all with different, very viable reasons for it, that all want a different structure to this. And I think that's where the fact that this was able to get done was because all three of those segments that have always kind of pushed and pulled against each other in the payouts were blindsided by the no entry fee payout that came down with no expectation.
I totally agree with that. I mean, think about being a young guy who just got in the elites that knows he has 2 years. He has 2 years to get requalified. And you've got all of that financial pressure on his shoulders. He's like, oh my gosh, I didn't get a check in the first. And some anglers, Matt, as you've seen over the years, they come in and it's like they're completely wearing blinders and they have no idea that this is expensive. They're there, they do well. They're catching those bass left and right. Then there's some of us that had to worry about the financial part of that. And when you do have those financial pressures, you don't fish to your ability. But then you get on a little roll, you get a little money in the bank, and then this whole new angler comes out. The picture that you showed in the 2009 tournament there at Dardanelle, son, I was really in financial trouble at that time. I had 2 young children, a wife, a mortgage, and had not been smart on some investments. And I was really behind the board. That money got my season paid for. And then I went on the best season of my career with 5 top 10s that year. And I don't recall missing a check the whole year because of the confidence. It's a big deal. So this season, Matt, what's interesting and what's going to happen are the first 2 tournaments of the year, the Florida swing. I don't have to even put a deposit down. I don't even have to pay a portion of my $10,000 for those first 2 tournaments. Never happened before in my recollection that I didn't have to put my own money in to get to go to 2 tournaments and have a chance to come home with $200,000 with no money down. So that's going to help a lot of guys build up their coffers, build up a little cash, and get their cash flow moving for the remainder of the season. That's going to make a lot of lives easier than what it's been in the past.
MLF has tried to do some interesting things. I don't want to leave them out of this discussion because they voted for no entry fees when they did make the split, and then for lack of a better term, and the details are different, but they basically said, hey, this is not sustainable. Like we can't pay you what you want to pay with no entry fees. And then they did that deal where they basically had like an independent, I'm going to get this wrong too, but this is the gist of it, folks. The independent loan that was like $1 million deal, and you bought into it and it paid for all your entry fees. And then when you got a check at a tournament, it went through that, and then it took your portion of the entry fees out and then sent you the check. So you basically were fishing for like $10,000, basically $10,000 a year, but that's because they were paying the full field, just like they had for a number of years in bass, especially after the split. So there's been a number of different ways over at MLF that they've tried to do that. Now, I mean, their entry fees are they're high. They're high. I mean, they're high across the board. Just from looking at this, this seems, and I mean, I wouldn't say this if it wasn't, because I think it's obvious. I've said things that I don't agree with bass. I've said things I don't agree with MLF. This seems pretty freaking reasonable, Mark. It seems like, why couldn't we come up with this 15 years ago? Why haven't we done this for the Elite Series guys in 2007 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 21 or 22?
Well, I can't answer that, Matt, but I think you coined it just perfectly. And it's reasonable, it's viable, and it's reasonable. It falls within Bass's business plan. So they're not having to go out on the limb for another $5 or $6 million annually, which that's a significant amount of money. They're giving us a good amount of money to fish for. So that's not wavered or changed. And now what we've done is with Bass and these detailed conversations is we've reduced the risk of doing business with Bass as a business owner. It's reduced my risk, 80%. 100% would have been great, but that's not viable.
Mhm.
That's just not viable in the parameters that we have to deal with on the Elite Series. I think we have found a good common ground. And that's why I said earlier in the interview, Matt, that we may see some tweaks. We may see some changes as we go through this first season and gather data from the anglers as to how has this benefited the anglers? Has
Mhm.
this been a negative for the anglers, or has it just been status quo? So that's going to be very interesting to find out at the end of the season. The Elite Series started in 2006, and it was a monumental Herculean effort for me to do at that time. It was 11 events, 11 events, and they were
Mm.
coast to coast. Expenses were outrageous. Expenses
Yeah.
were high. Those $10,000 checks certainly helped, but the emphasis on the media and the exposure that it gave you on the other side, on the promotional side of being a pro fisherman, that's where it really paid big dividends for
Yeah,
me.
and you're still with a lot of those companies to this day.
I have been, and I'm very fortunate. And that goes back to communication. That goes back to when you're asked to accomplish something for the company, you do that. Or if I have um, a flaw in a rod, you explain why there's a flaw there in the performance factor. You just don't go say this rod's a piece of crap. You go in and you go in with your data and you say, this is the reason. Made a call yesterday. I broke a rod that I can't explain how it broke. And I was on the phone with my company, which is Lose. Rods break. They
Mhm.
had things happen. This one broke in a very strange manner, like I hadn't seen while I was jigging a spoon. I caught a 3.5 pounder and I broke it. Did I have it in a hockey stick position? I may have. I don't know. But I got down with one of the guys there that gets the data to our engineers. Those things are very important. Little things like that. It goes back to that stinking word communication. And communicate with the people I work with, communicate with my board, communicate with all my people, and you find harmony. But you are right, Matt. What we've done, I think, is very reasonable.
I chuckle because I don't really understand business, Mark. I'm a communications major that started interning with Mark Jeffries at the Bass Zone after I played hockey for 22 years and then jumped straight into bass fishing. Just never really had the opportunity to sit there and understand. You know what I'm saying?
Right?
But one thing that I feel like I understand incredibly clear that so many people who follow this and a couple people who are in it don't understand is like you can't have no entry fees unless you're generating enough revenue, whether that's TV revenue, eyeball sales, or whatever,
Right?
to justify it. So there's a reason why you see a contract that's for $100 million for athletes or for this stuff. It's because like that, the dividends that they're bringing back in, they're generating revenue. And it, like if the bass fishing was generating $500 million a year off of the Elite Series and they were saying, hey man, we need your $5,000, like that's a different story.
Yes.
But until then, you have to put your own money into it so you have something to fish for, or else the company that is your platform is hemorrhaging money every year to make you guys happy, but then it won't exist.
Exactly. Exactly. That's a perfect analogy. So we have to work together at this point.
Yeah.
We have to share ideas. We have to move the needle so it's best for all of us. Those long contracts that I've had, Strike King 23 or 4 years, Yamaha 24 years, Skeeter 20 some years, Lose 15 years. Those have taken some concession on my part. Would I like to have been paid $100,000 a year from all of those? Hell yeah, I would have liked it. Is that reasonable and viable? No, that's not reasonable and viable. So I think where we are in competitive fishing is we've had organizations that were for-profit businesses, and they haven't been able to generate those numbers like a golf or a basketball or a football or whatever, so that everybody is contributing into the gross amount of money that's coming in. Television revenue. I mean, that's how NASCAR works. It's how golf works. Golf entry fees are negligible, almost non-existent. So it's all done on television rights. We as anglers, and I don't mean just the professional anglers, I'm talking about your folks that watch your show. We have a responsibility to the angling community as well. We need to introduce as many people as we can, young people, old people, girlfriends, wives, grandmas, grandpas, to fishing, to carry on the base that buys a Strike King 1.5, or they buy that Strike King spinnerbait, or they buy whatever it is. And that helps build the base. We're losing numbers in overall fishing license sales at a pretty good clip. We had a great rebound during the COVID years, but that was an anomaly. That was a unicorn, and numbers are back down to where they once were. So we're not going to see a bump like that again, most likely in our lifetime, but it's up to us to spread the word about how much fun fishing is and what a great activity it is. And then that adds to the base of revenue.
Do you think, how do I want to word this? Where do you think tournament fishing as a whole is, regardless of league or industry? Where do you think tournament fishing is as a whole? High level tournament fishing, Mark.
In how it performs as a moneymaker for competitive bass fishing, or just
health.
fishing?
Just give me a health. You're a doctor, high level bass fishing tournament walks through the door, and you have to give them a physical.
Oh, okay.
Is it healthy? Is it sick? Is it getting better? Is it aging? Is it where does it stand? You've been here longer than me, longer than all of us.
That's a great question. I think we're in a reasonable state of health.
Okay.
I think we have had times and time periods where our health wasn't as secure and wasn't as good. I think those were a little earlier in fishing careers, say those late 70s to 80s. I think things were a little more tenuous at that time. I think as things grew, as media grew, just think about how fast now we're translating information. Back in Ray's day, it was once every month or once every 10 months out of the year that the magazine came out, and that was our source. And now with Bass Talk Live and the internet and social and television with cameras in the boat watching what we're doing. Right now, Matt, if we were in a tournament and I developed a whole new technique on the fly in a tournament and I got a camera with me, somebody's going to learn how to do that within minutes of watching me. They're trying it later that afternoon. So it's gotten faster and faster and faster. Have all the inherent problems gone away from competitive fishing? No, they haven't, but we're starting to minimize a lot of those issues, blatant cheating, where in the bass fishing world, we haven't seen a lot of that blatant cheating at a high level. You've always got that one person that wants to take a shortcut. That's just human nature. And I hate that, because most of the guys I know are pretty honorable about this. I think our health is good. We could start walking more and start eating a little better, so our health values go up. And I think that's where we are with the ABB. Okay. We're going to make it healthier.
I do want to ask you about this. Is this board going to tackle technology as well? Because that to me, I would love to hear your answer on that.
Yeah, this is an ongoing topic. We're talking about that. We're trying to figure out what is the best thing. There's a lot of, again, it goes back to that passion between our
Mhm.
constituents. I mean, we've had some heated screaming matches about it. We've taken some surveys on some things. Um, eh, that is one that it's going to take baby steps. I think everybody should go back, and the only electronics you should have are flashers. That's just me. That's because I'm a
Right.
dinosaur. But Matt, my job as a professional angler is to learn the technology. I have to learn it, or as a dinosaur, I'm going to be extinct. The Mark Menendezes of the world will become
Yeah, you
extinct.
need to become the alligator, the dinosaur that survives.
That's right. Or a grinnell. They're a dinosaur. You
Yeah,
know,
you
so
can never kill those things. You can put them on the
you
back deck for
can't. You
2
can't.
days.
But it's up to me to become more proficient on it. So I'm
Yeah.
working on it. Do I like it? Do I like the ethical part of it? I've been through all of those things, and I don't even want to start that argument again.
But I'm
But
just saying, is that something that the board will
we're talking.
recommend to Bass to where you guys will have all those internal fights, and you'll have the guys that are, you'll have you and an Austin Felix and they'll all be able to have your
Sure.
input, and then you will go to the board and say, hey, in 2027 or 6 or whatever, this is what we would like to work with Bass on. This is what we would like to recommend, and it will have the input of all 103 anglers instead of Bass getting a call from some dude who's pissed off and has 2 hours to drive and lets him hear it, and then
Yes.
the same thing. It's more streamlined as, hey, this isn't what everyone wants, but as a whole, this is what we think is the healthiest and the best for the Elite Series.
And when we're able to take those surveys internally and we have those numbers, we can show you that 81 guys wanted this
Yep.
versus 24 of the other guys. So it's a 4-to-1 vote there. We'll have those in
And that's
empirical
from
numbers.
independent, from your group, not
Yes.
from Bass, that they're saying, well, of course they're going to say that they're sponsored by X company that sells this. This is going to be an independent deal from the anglers.
Well, it'll be black and white from us
Yeah.
because these
Yeah.
are the empirical numbers. These are the true numbers. And I think that's, if we could answer questions in yes and no, just think about how simpler everybody's lives would be.
Yep. You're right.
It would make it a simpler deal. And
Yeah.
so we're going to have those talks within. We're going to
Mhm.
push that envelope. We're going to try to find what brings people to the sport, what people want to watch, how anglers want to fish. We're going to try to find that. That is going to be a very difficult spot to find to make a majority happy. But again, I'd love to go back to the flashers and the age of the dinosaurs, and let's go back and do some real bass fishing. That's just me. That's not practical.
Yep.
That's my viewpoint, not my group's viewpoint.
Yeah. And
So,
then, you're standing next to, in that angler committee, the guy right behind you with the ponytail probably doesn't feel that way.
well, we've talked about it, and I think you would be surprised. I think Ben told me, he says, it would be kind of cool if all we did have were flashers again and paper maps. He said, think about how much energy that takes and how much preparation and how much thought and process. And I said, that's what we had to do. We have the mapping now on our chips. When we got GPS, Matt, it robbed from me as an angler.
It's what Harold Allen used to always say. He used to always say that the biggest thing that screwed him on Toledo Bend was accurate contours and GPS.
Well, the GPS makes a person lazy. And Harold and I have had this conversation. I had dinner with him this spring when we were at Toledo Bend. And, I could run down the lake with my hair on fire on Kentucky Lake, throw the throttle in neutral, drop the trolling motor, and make one cast and hit that stump. That's the only stump on that part of that ledge for a half a mile because I could triangulate.
Because you started guiding there in the 80s.
Well, not because I'm a dinosaur. That's how I had to make sure I could repeat that cast, was the basic skill of triangulation.
Yeah.
And
it's not even a
now
skill
that
anymore.
I've got a GPS, I push waypoint, so I know that stump is in the vicinity. Hell, Matt, it takes me 15 minutes to hit that stump until I go, oh, you moron. Line up your point, line up your house.
You got to scope it, Mark. You could just go, oh, there it is.
I can do that now. Exactly.
Don't spend 15
but my
minutes.
whole point, Matt, is GPS robbed a skill from me and it created new skills for me. And that's what's happening with forward facing. It's robbed the skills that I honed for 50 years and to become a complete angler. And it's teaching me new skills that I never thought would be available to me, like jerking a jerk bait. That's one of the things that I honed very early. I won my first national event on it, and I basically had that skill to myself for a very long time. Now I can actually tune my cadence to what I see and make that fish bite. I would have loved to have had it at the Pickwick tournament I won. There's no telling what I would have caught. And I still won the tournament by a big margin of 7 pounds. So it's teaching me more about fish behavior than I've ever known. But we're going to see new things. The tackle industry has taken a big hit because of this. I've been a big proponent of extending an olive branch to the tackle industry because we're not selling a lot of the things that we normally sell right now. So that's a negative to growth. There's always a positive, there's always a negative, and we're getting through that, and we will figure this too will be figured out.
I think it's I mean, I've had more contact with guys that are like, hey, don't show this to anybody, but look what we're coming out with. Than I think in the last, like I used to, I mean, but it's amazing all the different stuff that's coming in the next 2 to 3 years. I did a show on this, Frank Scalish, and you had a Rogue with your name on it for a while, didn't you, Mark?
I had my name on it. Yeah.
Yeah. We talking about old school Rogue. Jim Bitter had a Rogue. I think you had a Rogue. But he always, quite frankly, bitches about how long it takes for him to design something and then for it to go to market.
It's a long process, very long process.
And as fast as everything is moving right now, I think that makes it seem even longer. But I think coming into as we close out 2024 and 2025, we're going to see a lot of new concepts that have been in the works for the last couple of years that are actually going to get pushed out to the public now.
Absolutely. I'm working on a new bait for Strike King. It's still on its way to the US now. And it's called the Hardliner. It's a thin flat-sided crankbait that's indestructible. And in this whole process, we've been working on, Mike Russell and I've been working on that for a couple of years now. We're working on a mid-size now. We're going to work on a deeper one later. That whole process is so tedious and so long, and I won't let anything be released until I'm happy with it. Mike is twice as particular as I am. Yeah, Frank is right on that. It takes forever. So you miss a curve a lot of times on a trend. I just wish we could move that along a little better, but to get it right so that people can enjoy and have this new tool, it's just a tedious process on that development part. That's for sure.
You're gonna try to pull a Rick Clunn on this, Mark? Like you still got another good 30 years left in you?
Oh, I don't know. What will stop me from fishing, Matt's my body. I've had injuries before, back injuries, elbow injuries, wrist injuries, and that's from me having been a competitive tennis player in my youth, and then all the years of riding in an 18-foot boat. That's what will end up stopping me. My want to and my brain and things like that won't. Rick and I had a discussion in one of the last tournaments. I think it was at Champlain, of his elite career, and we were walking to the boat ramp, and I said, Rick, you've got 50 involved in this. I've got 35. So that's 85 years of experience. We, by definition, every tournament we should fish should be the 2019 St. John's event where we were battling out catching giants. He goes, wouldn't that be great? I said, yeah, it would be great. But he says, Mark, here's the deal. Youth, where Rick and I both have plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, and plan E, because we've had so many years of repetition and we have all of these ideas to combat whatever the set of circumstances we have. at the time, that's our game plan. Well, we may waste a whole day getting to plan E and it not even be right. So he says, Mark, youth has the ability to open their minds and just be open to change. Where you and I were open at one time, now we have a finite set of solutions. I know you can hear Rick saying this to me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, God dang, here you go, Big Daddy. Here you're knocking me off my feet like you always have. And he's exactly right. It's a real challenge as we age to stay open to things. And I think that's why you see so many anglers with the forward facing, it's spotlighting deer, it's illegal to do that. You hear all these negative things. It has more to do with opening up what's between your ears than just bitching and moaning about it.
I agree. And for some people, it has to do with hundreds of a cent per view on whatever social media platform they choose to speak about it on.
Could be that. It
just
could be that,
potentially maybe some ulterior motive there.
It could be. See, that's a whole new way of looking at it.
That's fantastic. I mean, I've had that discussion. I had Matt Steffen in studio. We did a Master Angler Quest for a week, and he roomed his year on the BPT with Drew Gill. And he's like, dude, he'd come in and he's like, I didn't even know like how to interact with him. Not because he was young, but because he would go, oh yeah, I found him here. And Matt would go, what? Why the hell would you even look there like this time of year? And to Gil, he was like, oh, because so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. Well, it's because he's 20 years old and the world is his oyster. He's open to it. And Matt's going, this time of year, they don't do this stuff. They do this stuff. So he's open. You can think you're open-minded, but it's like, hey, you got freedom to roam around the house. Whereas Drew Gill has freedom to roam around the universe.
Exactly. And then when you feel like they should be in a specific seasonal pattern, you've locked yourself into a very small portion of the lake most of the time. And then the rest of it's open out there behind you. And we've known for years that, what is it? 90% of the fish that are behind us. Well, hell yes, they are. We knew that. Mm-hmm. We just didn't have a vehicle to go out there and find them.
Would you say that's the biggest thing you've learned? Like, that's for me is there are difficult fisheries or difficult times of the year. The fish are doing something that makes it difficult to catch, sure. But like that turnover and the post spawn and stuff where it's typically like, hey man, you got to go out and grind it out and fish it like that just doesn't exist. It's just, we didn't know where they went to during those times. That's
exactly right. I mean, I just came back from Lake Cumberland and spent 3 days at Lake Cumberland. First time I've ever fished over there to amount to anything. Spent 3 days with some buddies and we were right in the middle of a turnover and it was really, really tough. There weren't a lot of fish in that median section of the water, that 10 to 40 feet.
The fishable part, the part that you can easily fish.
Correct. And I think I only had about 55 feet of Seagar on any of my spinning rods, so I couldn't get it to the damn bottom. But that these giant reservoirs, it's really hard to cover water. And as anglers that are only fishing for that 10% of those fish, that process is a hell of a lot quicker. And once I got to an area that I said, you know what, I'm going ultra shallow. As soon as I did that, we had a couple hours left in our trip. We started catching some fish. It's an interesting thing with the forward facing. It has just made the game so much faster than what it used to be. And a lot of these guys are making a cast at a fish 100% of the time. Whether they're all bass or not, that may not be.
I've changed my outlook in the opens, Mark. I mean, I reinvented who I was as an angler. I mean, I got made fun of for years for being the dink and dunk, upper middle of the pack dude, come in with 12 pounds every day, grind it out, and at the end, I'll always be there and have a chance. And I was for 3 or 4 years.
Right.
And then, there are a couple of these kids that were like, I asked them to be on BTL and they're like, it's a podcast. We do it every day. And they're like, oh, I've been listening to you since I was 8.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And I was like, can I pick your brain on some stuff? And they're like, absolutely. Dude, I completely reinvented from a tournament aspect where the goal is to come in with the 5 heaviest fish that you can each day.
Right.
Right now with the way it is, that makes the most sense to me. did I freaking love going down to Mexico and throwing a 5.8 Kitech on a 3/4 ounce head, just bombing it out into the abyss, and it just goes slack, and you reel down and crack it, and you don't know if it's a 4 or an 8 or what it like. Yeah, like that still gets me going. And I'd love to get those kids down. Like I'd love to get like a Drew Gill or one of those guys down there who have never just literally gone out and blind casted for a day, just to see what that was like. But yeah, I mean, I've completely changed and I'm hoping that this is the year that it pays off. So I had like 2 kind of transition years, and then, that schedule comes out. I mean, you look at the open division that I'm fishing, Kentucky Lake there in March, Leech in August, Norfolk in early April, and Rayburn in the middle of February.
Exactly.
I mean, I would think it would be counterproductive for me to make a cast on any one of those fisheries where I'm not casting to a fish. And I expect the other 200 anglers in that field, I expect 150 of them, that every cast they're making is to a fish.
Well, I agree. And for those 50 guys that are still fishing the way they used to fish, they're going to have their day. There will be an event where the planets line up and they figure the whole deal out. But the efficiency part of it, you better become better with your electronics. You better spend some time with that. I'll see you at Kentucky Lake, as a matter of fact. I jumped in that one.
Nice.
Just to fish one here on my home lake. So it's going to be neat to see all of that. I've seen the transition of what's going on in the Elite Series. I've seen the transition on the efficiency. Efficiency used to be, do I switch from 17-pound line to 12-pound line to get that crankbait deeper? Yeah. That used to be efficiency. Well, that's a minuscule part of performance now. So now it's about being around the best fish, around the biggest fish. Bass are not hard to catch. They've always just been hard to find. The fishing part of it.
I just got back from El Salto. No, they are not hard to catch.
They're not hard to catch. They never have been. We make it too hard most of the time. So now I think now that we've got individual underwater eyes and kryptonite there, being Superman, all of us with all of it. I just hope there's no negative health effects to everybody. I see all kinds of new injuries coming up, different kinds of neck injuries and muscle injuries and things like that.
So Mark, your wrist and elbows are
safe. Your wrist and elbows will never get tired again.
Beat Down Outdoors makes the ultimate double stack shorty, and should you want to raise that 36 inches off the front deck of your boat, but also lower it to the minimum so that you can see and are not obstructed, I would highly recommend looking into those. So that way you don't have to bend over to see your graph.
Exactly. I see a lot of these crappie guys. On Kentucky Lake. They've got one that's standing up there and it's right. It's.
Oh yeah. I do that for the winter with the crappie here. So the trick is you have your one, I got 2, right? And they're like this. So you have your one that you can see. Then you take this one, you put the cover on it and you make it like this. Now you've got your graph here. You got a little stand for your beer.
Yeah. Well,
so as you're out crappie fishing, you just put the cold beer there.
Well, you should be drinking coffee in the winter and not beer while you're out there when it's cold. And you have become, what's the best crappie that you've caught?
I just caught a 308. That was my PB.
3 pounds and 8 ounces?
No, 3.08. So like little under, like right at 3.1. It's a giant fish, but it's a
special fish.
Yeah, and I mean it's literally a technique that was born with forward-facing sonar. I mean, I'm setting the thing and fighting them, and I'm using a 16-foot rod and setting it at 30 feet out, and I'm dropping a bait behind the fish, lifting it up, moving it over it, dropping a 16th-ounce bait on 17-pound test fluorocarbon, watching the fish react to it. You have a tungsten bead above it so you can see and stuff. I mean, I release them all, but that was something where, I mean, I had Zeke Anderson. It was a fantastic show. I had a bunch of people that were like, why are you talking about crappie? It wasn't about crappie. A lot of the technology stuff that Bass is going through right now, crappie went through 6-7 years ago.
Right.
And it completely changed who was winning tournaments, how they were winning it. The backlash was all there. The technology, the bait, like all of that stuff happened just on a micro level, where I think there's some lessons that can be learned there on that. But yeah, no, a 3-pounder. That's my deer hunting. Like I've never hunted. I crappie fish all winter.
I don't blame you. That's a lot of fun.
I mean, there's potentially some things that are happening in 2025 that may lead to me talking and doing a lot more crappie fishing. And, you talk about passion. You've been doing this for well over 3 decades. Like, you have to have something that you're passionate about that keeps you going. And that's kind of like the new thing with me over the last 4 or 5 years is crappie fishing. So hopefully I've kind of figured out a way that I can turn that into something more than just a hobby in the second half of 2025. Little teaser
Well,
on that. So.
that's neat. But the one thing that I've always said about everybody asks me if I still enjoy my job. And I said, I do. I do enjoy it. I love trying to figure out the puzzle. I love it when it all comes together. I'm tired of the travel. I would love to know how many millions of miles I've driven. I've worn out at least 20 vehicles driving it across the country. But I still absolutely love it. And if you're finding something new in fishing that you love, I think that's great. I think diversification would probably make a lot more bass fishermen better at what they do. I spend a lot of time fishing in the rivers in the wintertime. I catch a lot of white bass. I catch a lot of sauger. I catch a lot of different things. And I wish I had more time to do that, because there's one thing in this world, Matt, that both of us are completely obsessed with. There's one thing, and it's tricking that fish to do something that it didn't want to do. That's the essence of what we all do as fishermen. And I still truly, truly love that.
Yeah, you're really close to some. I think you have probably one of the most underrated sauger fisheries in the country, pretty close to you.
It can be really, really good. The sauger have come back on Kentucky Lake. All you got to basically do anymore is go get out on an old shell bed and a hard spot out there in the middle of the lake and wind a 5XD or a 6XD, and you'll come home with a limit of sauger now. Have not seen them in years. Our white bass population, our rockfish population have skyrocketed. The crappie fishing here is off the chain. And the one thing that doesn't get any play is how good the shellcracker fishing is here. Our lake has just done a complete 180. And
Sealock fishes for those a lot, doesn't he?
Jason is a multi-species angler.
I always see him with big 11-inch bluegill and stuff from Kentucky Lake.
Well, dude, I was jigging a spoon in 35 feet of water this weekend, and I caught 2 of the biggest dang bluegill I've seen in a long
little
time.
slab spoon or a big spoon?
It was a half-ounce.
Okay.
Spoon.
Like a Hopkins jigging spoon.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And I'm out there that deep, and there's one. I load up and it doesn't feel right. And when it comes up, it's this big washed out dinner plate bluegill about this big. Awesome. And then 5 minutes later, I caught another one.
Are the carp under control, or are they learning that they're still that the fishery is thriving around it? Like, I mean, it seems like, I don't know about the largemouth, but like what you just mentioned, we've had you on the show before and AFCO did the deal with the carp, and we've had you on 3 or 4 times to talk about that, but I haven't heard of anything recently. Everything seems to be trending upwards on Kentucky Lake right now.
It certainly is. And this is a 2-prong effort. Our commercial fishermen have gotten very good at catching carp. They've developed techniques. They developed how they go about it. They're so efficient about it. They're in, they're out, and they just took another 10, 20, 25,000 pounds out of the lake in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 hours. I had a chance to spend time with Adam Martin, our local fisheries biologist for the western end of Kentucky, on our way to a big bass meeting in Frankfort with Fish and Wildlife, Kentucky Fish and Wildlife. And I said, okay, spill the beans. And he says, Mark, one of the unique things that is happening is we're finding that these fish are not spawning and that their lifespans are not as long as we thought they would be. As a general on a general average.
The carp.
So, yes, the carp. Okay. And so what's happening are some of these fish are living their entire lives and they're not getting a chance to spawn. Now, why we're researching this now. So you're getting generations of fish that are not propagating the species as vigorously as they once were. And we don't understand why that is. So the overall numbers of fish are going down naturally and not being reproduced again. So that is creating room in the carrying capacity, which is the amount of fish a lake can hold. So our game fish are coming back with a vengeance. I think, and we have a great smallmouth fishery. Smallmouth are dominating everything right now. 24, 25 pound sacks of smallmouth. It's as good a weights as you're seeing at the St. Lawrence without 7, 8, 9 pound fish being caught. But I think what you're getting ready to see is another shift in the lake, because we have a world, Matt, a world of 13 and a half to 15 to 16 inch largemouth in the lake right now. I mean, tons of them. So I think the basic population right now is 60% smallmouth, 40% largemouth. And I think in the next couple of years, you're going to see that bounce up into about a 50-50 again. And after that, I think largemouth will be king again. But it's just a unique thing that's happened. We're not having the carp spawn. We're not having the young of the year. TWRA, Tennessee Wildlife, they're not finding young of the year carp in their shocking studies. So I'm not saying that it's 100% that they're not spawning, but it sure seems like a hell of a lot less are spawning. So we're not having those big numbers of silvers. Do we still have them? Yes, we still have them. What I think is going to emerge as an issue more so than the silvers are grass carp. We've got a ton of them. And this fall, when I was probing the shallow water and the stumps and the back ends of the creeks and around docks and rocks and whatever's back there, I could visually see in every pocket that I went into 5, 6, 8, 10 of these fish that are 15 to 20 pounds long. And that's the grass carp. So those are going to have a mitigating circumstance at some point, and hopefully we'll find some way to get them out of there too.
That's a bow hunting tournaments.
I agree.
They are fun to hook though, because you always snag them.
I caught one, Matt, 2 falls ago when I was prototyping the gravel dog crankbait, and I only had like 2 gravel dogs and one in a bone crawl.
You wanted to get it back,
and I caught that damn thing in the mouth. It bit it. It bit it, and it was about a 15 pounder. And I just knew I'd snagged a silver, but no, it bit the dang crankbait.
All right. I really enjoyed this, too. This is an hour and 20 minutes, and I want to thank you for taking time out, and your perspective is always appreciated, and excited times ahead as you work with Bass with the new committee and the fellow 5 anglers moving forward.
Well, I appreciate it, Matt. I got into this. I really didn't need the responsibility and the headaches and getting my butt chewed on a regular basis, but I feel a real responsibility after being in the industry as long as I have to try to make it better for the next bunch. And that's my 100% motivation for being on the board and helping with the board and helping with Bass, just to make it better. So some young anglers may not have to go through the trials and tribulations that I win, that they could have a career as lucky and as long as mine has been. So
280
honored to be a part of it. And I'm enjoying it. It takes a lot of time, but I'm enjoying it. And hopefully we will accomplish just that. I think we've put our best foot forward, and we're headed in the right direction.
280 events. It's a lot of events.
A lot of events.
A lot of experience. All right. Thanks, Mark. Have a great Christmas.
Thank you, sir. You have a Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to all the BTL followers and listeners. And we look forward to spending more time with you in the future.
All right. See ya. All right. That is the one and only Mark Menendez. Very cool thing. It seems like all around that's a positive. That, like I said, I've had a lot of on and off the record conversations over the last couple of weeks with everything that's going on and off the record. Everybody that I've talked to about this committee has been very positive with not only how the other Elite Series anglers have reacted to it and embraced it, but also how the top people at Bass, even the ones who weren't initially completely on board with it, have come around and seen the benefit of this kind of elite advisory board and how it can benefit both sides. So, all right, that's all we got. Want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I take this week off to kind of revamp everything for the 21st season of BTL, going into the 4th season, running the show by myself. Can't thank all of the viewers and listeners enough for the feedback, for the support. the sponsors that allow this to happen, that allow me to make a living, that allow these shows to be sent to you roughly 200 times a year at no charge. The support that you guys show towards those sponsors, both endemic and non-endemic, greatly appreciated. And like I said, that's the reason why the show will roll into the 21st season. So this has been another edition of BTL Bass Talk Live. Enjoy the holiday break. See ya.